You can't be serious, Erica. That's not your decision to make, my father snapped, his voice slicing through the tension in the conference room. I straightened my back, refusing to let my nerves show as I stared back at him from across the polished table. With respect, Dad, I said firmly, I wouldn't have brought this to the table if I didn't believe it was the right move for the company. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing, but I didn't flinch. This was the moment I had worked toward for years, and I wasn't going to let it slip by without a fight. My name is Erica Lanstrom, and I was 28 when all of this took place. I worked for Lanstrom Energy, my father's oil and gas company, one of the biggest names in Houston. The company had been the backbone of our family for as long as I could remember. My dad had built it from scratch, and to him, it was everything. While my older brother, Scott, had always been groomed as the heir apparent, I had to scratch and claw just to be noticed. Despite my qualifications and my dedication, I was never seen as part of the legacy, at least not in the way my father saw Scott. When I joined the company, I knew I wouldn't get special treatment. My father made that perfectly clear from the beginning. You can work here, he'd said, folding his hands across his chest, but don't expect any shortcuts. You want to prove yourself? Then earn it. I was 22 then, fresh out of college with a business degree and ambition burning in my chest. I didn't mind starting from the bottom. In fact, I wanted to. I was determined to earn every inch of respect by working harder than anyone else. I spent months getting my hands dirty, touring refineries, learning operations, analyzing field reports. While other recent grads were managing departments, I was sitting through shift meetings and learning the basics. And I was okay with that. Meanwhile, Scott was handed a top-level position as soon as he finished grad school. No hands-on experience, no time in the trenches, he walked right into the boardroom, acting like he ran the place. The other executives whispered about it, but no one said a word aloud. After all, he was the boss's son, and the favorite. That was all that mattered. I buried myself in the work. I stayed long after others left, combing through quarterly projections, tracking industry trends, absorbing everything I could. And the deeper I dug, the more alarmed I became. Lanstrom Energy wasn't as stable as we pretended it was. The industry was evolving, and we weren't keeping up. The company was stuck relying on outdated infrastructure and dismissing the need for sustainable alternatives. It wasn't just short-sighted, it was dangerous. I raised the concern during a department meeting, suggesting that we start investing in renewable energy initiatives. Scott leaned back in his chair, flashing that arrogant smirk. Renewables? Come on, Erica. This is oil and gas. What do you think we're going to do, plug a windmill into a pipeline? Laughter circled the room, but I didn't back down. My face burned, but my voice didn't waver. I'm not saying we throw out everything we've built, I replied calmly, but the market is changing. We need to evolve, or we'll be left behind. The smirks faded slightly, but no one came to my defense. I could see it in their eyes, they weren't ready for change. But I was. And I wasn't going to stop pushing. My father remained silent through the entire exchange, his face giving away nothing. When the meeting wrapped up, he didn't say a single word to me. But that night, I noticed an email in my inbox. It was from him. He'd asked me to prepare a comprehensive report on renewable energy trends. It wasn't a warm gesture or even a compliment, but it was something. For the first time, he was asking for my input. That email became my anchor, a rare opportunity to prove I belonged. I poured myself into the project. Weeks went by as I gathered data, analyzed market trends, and spoke to experts across the industry. Every spare second I had went into perfecting that report. When I finally handed it to my dad, I could feel my hands trembling. He took it without any real reaction, flipping through the pages with a serious expression. "This is solid work," he said eventually, glancing up. "I'll review it more closely and get back to you." Not exactly high praise, but it was a step. I waited for weeks with no follow-up and eventually assumed he'd buried it in a stack of ignored files. But then, during a board meeting, I overheard him repeating parts of my research, my ideas. He never acknowledged me, but just knowing he used my work felt like a small victory. For the first time, I had the faintest sense of influence at Lanstrom Energy. I knew it wasn't enough. If I wanted more, I'd have to keep pushing, harder. Over the next 6 years, I worked myself to the bone. Every promotion I earned was a result of endless effort and relentless persistence. Scott, on the other hand, coasted through roles handed to him as if they were owed. I clawed my way up while he floated. By the time I hit 25, I was managing small teams and handling budgets, slowly building a reputation among the newer generation of executives. I had to fight not only for the work itself but also to be taken seriously, as a woman and as the founder's daughter. Every slip-up was magnified. Every win was downplayed. So I let the results do the talking. At 28, I landed a senior role in operations, overseeing some of our most mission-critical projects. It wasn't the top, but I was finally close. Scott, meanwhile, had yet to prove he could manage anything effectively. His decisions were impulsive, focused on short-term wins rather than sustainable growth. The consequences of his leadership were beginning to show, but my father seemed either blind to them or unwilling to admit it. That fragile balance stayed intact, until the day everything changed. It started the moment I stood up during that conference and made my move, challenging my father in front of the entire board and triggering a domino effect that would reshape everything. The air was thick with tension as I wrapped up my proposal. My father sat at the head of the table, arms folded, his gaze unreadable. Scott looked like he was ready to burst. "This is insane," he barked, slamming his hand on the table. "You're not actually considering her idea over mine, are you?" I kept my voice steady. "This isn't about whose plan gets picked, Scott. It's about what's best for the company, financially and strategically. If we don't adapt now, we risk losing our edge." My dad leaned forward slowly, locking eyes with me. "So you think you know more than the rest of us, Erica? More than me?" For a split second, I paused, his authority pressing down like a weight I couldn't ignore. But then I thought about everything I'd sacrificed to get here. The long nights, the relentless drive, the years I spent learning every inch of this company. I wasn't that inexperienced 22-year-old anymore. I was ready. "Yes," I said, locking eyes with him. "This time, I do." The room fell into a tense silence, thick and suffocating. My father leaned back in his chair, jaw set, his eyes boring into mine like he was sizing me up all over again. "We're done here," he said, voice clipped and emotionless. "Everyone else, you're dismissed." Chairs scraped back as the executives filed out. Scott shot me a smug grin on his way past. "Good luck, sis," he muttered, sarcasm dripping from every word. I clenched my hands under the table, forcing myself not to react. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. When the door shut behind them, I stayed seated. My heart thundered in my chest, but I held firm. My dad leaned forward, elbows on the table, his voice low and biting. "Do you have any idea what you just did, Erica?" he asked, each word sharp as a blade. "You challenged me. In front of my entire leadership team." I met his gaze, my own voice calm but unyielding. "With all due respect, inside this building, I'm not your daughter. I'm an executive at Lanstrom Energy, and I care about the company more than appearances." His stare narrowed, his expression darkening. I braced for him to raise his voice, but instead, he leaned back and scoffed. "You think this is about image? This is about order. About knowing your place. I built this company from the ground up, and I won't let you jeopardize that just to make a point." I held steady, refusing to flinch. "I'm not here to make a point. I'm here to protect what you built. That's why I spoke up, because if we keep clinging to the past, we're going to lose everything." He studied me for a long moment. Then, finally, he sighed. Slow. Calculated. "You've got guts, Erica. I'll give you that. But guts don't equal wisdom." he stood, signaling that our conversation was over. You've made your move. Now let's see if you can back it up. And just like that, he walked out, leaving me alone in the boardroom, adrenaline still pulsing through my veins. This wasn't about earning his respect anymore. It was about proving that I belonged here, and I wasn't going to fade into the background just because it made people more comfortable. Later that afternoon, I sat across from Rebecca Morgan, one of the few senior women at Lanstrom, and someone whose career I'd quietly followed for years. Smart, composed, and unapologetically effective. If anyone understood what I was up against, it was her. So, she said, flipping through the pages of my report, her perfectly polished nails tapping a slow rhythm against the conference table, you're proposing we modernize the refineries and invest in renewables, simultaneously. That's ambitious. It's expensive, I acknowledged, but also critical. The refineries are hemorrhaging money due to outdated systems, and if we don't pivot toward renewables now, we'll be left scrambling in a few years. She looked up at me, her gaze unreadable. You're not wrong, she said at last. This is exactly the kind of long-term strategy this company needs. But, Erica. I leaned forward, already bracing for what I knew was coming. This place, she continued, her voice dropping a notch, wasn't designed for women like you and me. You're sharp, you've done your research, and your ideas are solid, but none of that guarantees they'll listen. The higher-ups at Lanstrom? They don't like disruption, especially when it comes in heels. I get that, I said, my tone quiet but steady. But someone has to push for this. The data doesn't lie. They can tune me out for a while, but eventually, they won't be able to ignore the numbers. Rebecca nodded, and for the first time, I saw something like admiration in her eyes. You've got grit. And you're right, this company needs a shake-up. If you want a piece of advice, never let them see you second-guess yourself. Keep pushing. Be a force. It'll wear you out, but that's the only way forward. Her words stayed with me as I left the meeting. She was right, this wasn't a space built for women who challenged the status quo. But I wasn't planning to back down. I was here to make my mark, and I wasn't going anywhere. The next few weeks moved fast. I poured everything I had into tightening my proposal, integrating Rebecca's insights, preparing for the resistance I knew was coming. My office became a second home, stacks of research papers, late-night takeout, and a graveyard of empty coffee cups littered every surface. I felt the pressure mounting, but I refused to let it crack me. One evening, as I was deep into analyzing cost scenarios, a quiet knock broke my focus. I glanced up to find Marcus Langston, one of the senior engineers, leaning in the doorway with a cautious smile. Mind if I step in? He asked. Of course, I said, gesturing to the chair opposite mine. What brings you by this late? He sat down, his eyes scanning the piles of documents on my desk. Word is you're working on something big, he said. I just wanted to say, I think you're onto something. I blinked, caught off guard. Really? He nodded. Definitely. The industry's shifting fast, and we're lagging behind. I've been experimenting with a few sustainable tech ideas, but I've never been able to get leadership to take them seriously. Well, I said, leaning in, suddenly very interested, why don't you tell me everything? We spent the next hour bouncing ideas back and forth, strategies to cut emissions, boost efficiency, and bring renewable energy sources into our operations. It had been a long time since I felt this energized. Marcus wasn't just smart, he actually understood the challenges we were up against and, more importantly, shared my vision for moving forward. Why haven't you pitched this to my father? I asked curiously. He gave a small, resigned smile. Let's just say he's not exactly open to new ideas, especially from someone like me. Someone like you? A young engineer on the outside, he said with a shrug. I'm not part of his inner circle, so my input doesn't carry much weight. But maybe if we present it together, he'll have to take notice. I thought about it. That could actually work. Over the next several weeks, Marcus and I worked side by side, refining our proposals into a full-scale plan that balanced cost efficiency with innovative upgrades. He brought the technical depth, I shaped the strategic framework, and together we built something solid. His passion was infectious, and his perspective often challenged mine in the best way. One afternoon, as we wrapped up a long session, Marcus gave me a look. "You're different from most people here, you know that?" "Different how?" I asked with a teasing smile. "In a good way," he replied. "You actually care about creating real change." His words warmed me. "Thank you, Marcus. That means a lot coming from you." Our collaboration started to spill over into our personal lives. Coffee breaks turned into long chats, and stories about our workdays led to stories about everything else. Talking to him was easy, and it didn't take long before I started looking forward to those moments more than I expected. But just as our partnership grew stronger, so did the resistance we faced. My dad remained deeply skeptical of anything that challenged tradition, and my brother had become outright combative. At Sunday dinner, it was obvious I was still on the outside looking in. My father barely said a word to me, too busy praising Scott for his latest golf achievement. "Have you read Erica's proposal?" my mom asked gently, trying to steer the conversation my way. My dad waved her off. "It's idealistic. What we're doing now works just fine." I bit back a sigh. "With all due respect, Dad, the current model won't hold up much longer." Scott chuckled under his breath. "And here we go again. Little sister trying to school us on business." I steadied my voice. "I'm just saying we should consider paths that ensure long-term sustainability." My dad put his fork down, his gaze sharp and unwavering. "That's enough, Erica. This isn't the time or the place." I glanced around the table, catching the stiff posture and downcast eyes of every family member. The silence was louder than words. No matter what I said or did, I still felt like an outsider in my own home. Later that night, I called Rebecca. "I don't know how much more of this I can take," I admitted, my voice strained. "It's like I'm shouting into a void." "Change never comes easy," she said gently. "Especially in a place so resistant to it. But don't forget why you're doing this. It's not just for them. It's for the people who count on this company to keep the lights on, to feed their families. That's who you're fighting for." Her words struck a chord. She was right, this wasn't about proving myself to my family anymore. It was about impact. It was about responsibility. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with the board. If I couldn't get through to my father directly, maybe the board, those with skin in the game, would listen to reason. With Marcus and Rebecca by my side, I presented a detailed proposal, data-driven projections, calculated risk assessments, and long-term growth models. Every number told the same story: adapt or fall behind. When I wrapped up, the room was silent. Finally, one of the board members leaned forward and cleared his throat. "This is compelling," he said slowly. "You've clearly done your homework." My father didn't say a word, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He couldn't argue with facts, and that made his silence more telling than any outburst. Scott, on the other hand, looked ready to erupt. After the meeting, my dad called me into his office. "You're pushing limits," he said, his voice hard. "Maybe someone needs to," I replied, holding his gaze. "I care about this company just as much as you do. I'm not here to challenge you, I'm here to protect what we've built." He studied me for a long beat before speaking again. "You're persistent. I'll give you that. Does that mean you'll consider the plan?" "I didn't say that," he cautioned. "But maybe it's worth another conversation." It wasn't a win, not yet. But it was a start. In the following months, the momentum grew. The board greenlit a pilot project to update one of our older refineries. Early numbers came back strong, and word began to spread. Employees started noticing the shift, and even the most rigid voices in leadership began to soften. One evening, as I was leaving late, I ran into my dad in the lobby. "Heading out?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, adjusting the strap of my bag. It's been a long day. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. I wanted to tell you, you've done well. The board's been impressed. I blinked, caught off guard. Thanks, Dad. His lips curved in a faint smile. Maybe it's time we stop butting heads and start working side by side. For the first time, I felt something shift between us, a quiet sense of mutual respect I'd been chasing for years. That night, I met Marcus for a quick drink to share the update. Sounds like things are finally moving, he said, lifting his glass. 1 inch at a time, I replied with a tired smile. He watched me for a moment, then said, You've done more than just shake things up at the company, Erica. You've made people like me feel heard, for the first time in a long time. I felt my chest tighten a little at his words. I wouldn't be here without your support, I said honestly. He reached across the table, his hand wrapping around mine. To fresh starts, he said quietly. Looking into his eyes, I felt something I hadn't in months, hope. Maybe things were finally starting to align. Over the next few months, the changes we'd pushed for at Lanstrom Energy began to speak for themselves. The revamped refinery surpassed projections, cutting costs and boosting output. The renewable initiatives we piloted earned attention from both the press and skeptical board members. Even Scott, though he still bristled in meetings, stopped mocking my ideas outright. The one person who remained harder to read was my dad. Though he brought me into more high-level discussions and occasionally nodded at my contributions, there was a subtle wall he couldn't, or wouldn't, let down. I sensed a tug-of-war within him, pride on one side, and a lifetime of traditional beliefs on the other. Each win brought us a little closer, but there was always a part of him holding back, as if recognizing my success meant letting go of something deeply ingrained. One afternoon, Rebecca popped into my office. She didn't bother knocking, she never did. He's testing you, she said, sitting across from me like she'd been waiting for this moment. I figured, I replied, setting aside the spreadsheet I'd been reviewing. But what more does he need? The numbers are there. The results are there. She gave me a knowing smile. It's not just about the results, Erica. He knows you're capable. But this isn't just a company to him, it's his identity, his legacy. He's not just looking for someone who can manage it. He's looking for someone who understands what it means to carry it. I exhaled, the weight of that truth settling over me. And how exactly am I supposed to prove that? Rebecca stood, smoothing the sleeve of her blazer before heading for the door. You're already doing it, she said. Just keep showing him that you're not here to replace him. You're here to lead. There's a difference. Her words echoed in my mind long after she left. And slowly, I began to notice it. Subtle things, my dad asking my opinion in meetings, letting me take the lead on key strategy sessions, even deferring to my judgment once or twice. It wasn't dramatic, but it was meaningful. The distance between us hadn't disappeared, but the space was closing. Piece by piece, I was earning not just a seat at the table, but a voice that couldn't be ignored. The turning point came during a quarterly review meeting. One of our most influential investors voiced concerns about the company's long-term vision, questioning whether Lanstrom Energy was truly prepared to adapt to the evolving energy market. I was preparing to respond when, to everyone's surprise, my father spoke first. Erica has been leading the charge on that front, he said, motioning toward me. Her initiatives around refinery modernization and renewable energy exploration are already delivering strong early results. I believe her leadership is what this company needs moving forward. The room went still. All eyes turned first to him, then to me. And for the first time, I saw something in his expression that I had never seen before, real respect. Not just for the work I'd done, but for who I had become. As we left the meeting, he walked beside me in silence before placing a hand on my shoulder. You've earned this, Erica, he said in a quiet voice. Every bit of it. That moment stayed with me. It wasn't a full endorsement or a ceremonial passing of the baton, but it was something. For the first time, I didn't just feel like I belonged at Lanstrom Energy, I felt like he finally saw that I belonged too. That night, as I shared the moment with Marcus, he smiled. "So what now?" I returned the smile. "Now? I keep going. This is just the beginning." 1 year later, everything looked different. The board had unanimously approved the full rollout of our modernization strategy, and the company was experiencing a surge of growth that few had seen coming. Investors were no longer skeptical, they were enthusiastic. Lanstrom Energy was no longer just an old name in oil and gas, it was being recognized as a forward-thinking industry leader. Scott had gradually stepped back from his leadership duties. He remained on paper in a senior position, but his influence had all but disappeared. Even my father had stopped shielding him, finally acknowledging that legacy alone couldn't lead a company into the future. Competence had to matter, and for once, it did. Then one evening, my father called me into his office. The building was quiet, the day long over, and the buzz of overhead lights the only sound as I stepped inside. He sat behind his desk, looking tired but thoughtful. "Have a seat, Erica," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I sat down, folding my hands in my lap. "Everything okay?" He leaned forward, his hands clasped, his voice steady. "You've proven me wrong," he said. "Again and again. You've shown me not only that you can do this, but that you were always meant to." I didn't say anything. I let him speak. "I've taken my time with this decision," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "And I've made up my mind. At the next board meeting, I'll be stepping down as CEO, and I'll be recommending you as my successor." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Those words, ones I'd dreamed of for years, finally hung in the air, real, undeniable, and offered not out of duty, but because he truly believed in me. "Thank you," I replied, keeping my voice steady even as emotion surged inside me. "I promise I won't let you down." He gave a small, proud nod. "I know you won't." When the board unanimously approved the transition weeks later, the moment still felt unreal. Seeing my name etched into the frosted glass on the CEO's office door gave me chills. The responsibility that came with it was immense, but I was more than ready for it. That evening, as I stood at the window overlooking the sparkling Houston skyline, Marcus stepped into my office. "Well, CEO Lanstrom," he said with a playful grin, "has a nice ring, doesn't it?" I laughed, shaking my head in disbelief. "It still feels like a dream." He walked over and rested a hand on my shoulder. "You earned every bit of this, Erica." I turned to face him, a quiet fire in my chest. "This is just the start," I said. "Now the real work begins." Over the next few years, my father and I built a new kind of relationship, one grounded in respect and shaped by the trials we had faced together. Marcus became not just my partner in life but my closest ally at work, helping bring our shared vision to life. And Scott? He eventually found his own lane, choosing to step away from the company and giving it room to breathe. With all that behind me, I stepped into the future, ready to lead Lanstrom toward the legacy I had always imagined.